That's the thinking. I'm not going to defend that that's what they did, but that's the. So the first canon there: if anyone says that in the Mass a true and proper sacrifice is not offered to God, or that to be offered is nothing else but that Christ is given to us to eat, let him be anathema. So it's not that Jesus just simply appeared, well, not appears, but becomes present in the Blessed Sacrament, in the Eucharist, but that this is an entry into his unique sacrifice on the cross. And that sacrificial aspect. So in the Old Testament, priests were those who offered sacrifice, right? And Christ is called the high priest because he offers himself. It's the first time that the priest and the victim are one and the same. And that the ministerial priesthood, the sacrifice of the Mass, is an entry into that one perfect offering. So the second canon: if anyone says that by those words, do this for the commemoration of me, or do this in memory of me, Christ did not institute the apostles' priests, or did not ordain that they and other priests should offer his own body and blood, let him be anathema. So here there is in the Church's teaching, it's giving a specific interpretation of what a biblical passage means, right? And the Church has the right to do that as the teacher of what has been passed down, a guardian and teacher of what's been passed down. The third canon: if anyone says that the sacrifice of the Mass is only a sacrifice of praise and of thanksgiving, I guess that could be certain hymns in our own hymnal, or that it is a bare commemoration of the sacrifice consummated on the cross, but not a propitiatory sacrifice, or that it profits him only who receives, and that it is not to be offered for the living and the dead for sins, pain, satisfactions, and other necessities, let them be anathema. So this is preserving the Church's teaching that the Mass, sacrifice of the Mass, is efficacious even for those who aren't present. Let's say you have a Mass offered for your relative who's the prodigal son, right? That it still has efficacious effects even for those who aren't present. Or let's say someone who's not able to receive, didn't keep the fast, right? Didn't keep the fast from food and drink and just showed up at Mass. They can still receive grace from attending Mass. It's not you only receive grace if you receive the Eucharist at that time. The fourth canon: if anyone says that by the sacrifice of the Mass a blasphemy is cast upon the most holy sacrifice of Christ consummated on the cross, let them be anathema. So one of, I think it was Calvin's things, is that he offered it once for the self-purification. So that the sacrifice of the Mass is putting Christ back on the cross again and again and again, and that's not what's allowed. That's not what's proper. But that's not our understanding, nor has it ever been. The sixth canon: if anyone says that the canon of the Mass contains errors and is therefore to be abrogated, so this would be the first Eucharistic prayer, let them be anathema. The ninth canon: if anyone says that the rite of the Roman Church, according to which a part of the canon and the words of consecration are pronounced in a low tone, is to be condemned, or that the Mass ought to be celebrated in the vernacular only, or that water ought not be mixed with the wine, that is to be offered in the chalice, for that is contrary to the institution of Christ, let them be anathema. So these are things that, propositions that are condemned, that someone along the way had been proposing. And then there were certain reforms put in place, spelled out, that the bishops were to institute, and that ultimately the Missal, the New Roman Missal, was supposed to address. One of the things that that was condemned and was to be gotten rid of was all hints of simony, that the Mass was for sale. So, well, there's such thing as a Mass stipend. You want to have Mass said, and you pay for the Mass. Well, it's not buying the Mass, and you don't have to do it. But it is a way of trying to keep the priest from being in destitution. Yet you cannot, so one of the things condemned here is the practice of, well, if you pay me $20 more, or whatever, ounces of gold, I will have this cardinal say the Mass, or the superstition on its, those types of things. That was a abuse that was condemned and to be gotten rid of. A second was that any irreverence may be avoided. He shall forbid any unknown or wandering priest from celebrating Mass. So the bishop has this authority, and still today, if, let's say, I were to go to another country, I would contact my provincial to get what's called a celebrate, let him celebrate, right? Translates as that. And basically my credentials that I'm in good standing. And the bishops have an authority and an obligation to see that would-be rent-a-priest aren't showing up and saying Mass in places. The third is, furthermore, they shall not allow anyone who is publicly and notoriously stained with crime either to minister at the holy altar or to assist at the sacred services, nor shall they suffer the holy sacrifice to be celebrated either by any seculars or regulars. So they use the term regulars for religious here, whatsoever in private houses. So these were things that were forbidden, although if you look at England in the period of the Reformation where the Mass in the Catholic Church was outlawed, there's exceptions, right? The church is outlawed. They would have a little chapel in the house of devout Catholics, hidden away and behind the fireplace and kind of thing. So there's certain way of interpreting that. The fourth, they shall also banish from churches all those kinds of music in which, whether by the organ or in the singing, there is mixed up anything lascivious or impure. I put this one up for Deacon Frank's case. As also all secular action, vain and therefore profane conversation, all walking about, noise and clamor, that so the house of God may be seen to be and may be called truly a house of prayer. So that's one of his one of his favorite things. So this is where it comes from. Okay.
Beware.
You'll need that in the bulletin, yeah. From the Council of Trent. And fifth, they shall by ordinance and under given penalties provide that priests do not celebrate at other than due hours, nor employ other rites, so making up their own things, or other ceremonies and prayers in the celebration of Mass, besides those which have been approved by the Church and have been received by a frequent and praiseworthy usage. So it wasn't just Vatican II that said priests do not have the right to change the rites of the Church. Trent also said it. And then they touched on the issue of receiving from the chapels. So there had been a petition by the emperor and by certain rulers in eastern part of Europe. Think back Bohemia, Jan Hus and the Council of Constance. This is one of the things that was very stressed by him, and that certain Protestants in those areas had been doing this, and there was the local rulers and bishops were concerned that this was pulling Catholics away, so they asked if they could distribute communion under both forms in those areas. And the council basically decided they would leave that up to the Pope to give the permission to do that. So that it actually did happen in places, and it wasn't that Vatican II was prohibited, absolutely prohibited before, and then became available afterwards. There was that practice. From that, they moved on to the sacrament of orders. So going through the sacraments. And the sacrament of orders, there were 8 canons. Look at about 5 of them here. If anyone says that there is not in the New Testament a visible and external priesthood, or that there is not any power of consecrating and offering the true body and blood of the Lord, and of forgiving and retaining sins, but only an office and bare ministry of preaching the gospel, or that those who do not preach are not priests at all, let them be anathema. If anyone